Hello, everyone. So we're back. It is the fall. Welcome back to Robert Morris. Welcome back to a new semester, hopefully a semester that is going to be more normal. This is RMU Psychology, and we are presenting Let's Talk Psychology Career Pathways. So just a little bit of a reminder for everyone. We are going to be recording these sessions and then uploading them to YouTube. So you can find them at RMU Psychology on the YouTube channel. Please mute your microphones if you aren't talking or if you don't have any questions. If you do have any questions or concerns, please put them in the chat bar pictured to the right. So the presenters today are myself. I'm a MS in Counseling Psychology graduate student, as well as a second year MS in Counseling graduate assistant. Amber?
And my name's Amber Sobeck. I am the Master's Graduate Assistant for Psychology, and I'm also the first year. Yeah.
Okay. So just a little bit of an overview. We are going to kind of talk about psychology career pathways in a bachelor's degree with a master's degree, and then kind of what you can do on a doctoral level as a psychologist. So we'll kind of talk about what psychologists do, becoming a psychologist, licensure and certification for psychologists, as well as some master's degrees, and then types of psychologists, and then advice going into the field.
All right, so psychology is huge. There's so many different career pathways you can take. There's a whole bunch of starting positions within the bachelor's, and then you get more into it with the master's, the doctorate, and then the PhD level. Myself personally, once I graduated from RMU in 2020, I started with a company called Neurorestorative. We are in the Pittsburgh area. You work with clients that have different diagnoses of like brain injury, schizophrenia, hydrocephalus maybe, things like that. And you kind of help them regain their cognitive function to help live more of an independent life. So that was a great starting job. And once you get into the master's and you get your master's, you can start doing more things. Like you can have your own practice. You can work with other people in other practices. You can work to try to get into the school system. If you want to work as a school counselor, you have to do a little bit more training. Doctorate programs obviously help you lead to your PhD or your PsyD, which is like the highest forms you can get within our field. And it's pretty awesome. I'm good for the next one.
Amber, can you see did it change?
No, it didn't.
What's it stuck on?
Psychology career.
Okay, so it's not changing?
Mm-mm. Here, I can pull it up on here. Okay. Having some technical. Okay, there it is. Okay, so getting in a little deeper from the first section is the Bachelor Degree Careers in Psychology. As you can see on the PowerPoint, there's like advertising agents, career counselor, case manager, child care worker, lab assistants, and stuff like that. Again, I am considered an NCS, which is a neurocognitive specialist. I could become a clinical coordinator within time and stuff like that. I feel like the bachelor's degree is like a good way to start, especially if you do want to go back. I took that gap year and stuff between my master's from my bachelor's, and honestly, it's helped, I think, within my schooling, and it's making like my master degree experience a little bit better because I'm able to apply what I've learned in the field. I mean, within the year I have. So I feel like most of the bachelor degrees jobs are a very good starting point. And if you do want to further your education, I feel like it's great experience to help when you make that decision. Okay, did it pop up?
I am. I don't know why it's taking so long.
It's lagging.
Yeah, it is. Give me 1 sec. It might be the connection.
Okay. I mean, I can just go off of mine if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So after the first section within the bachelor's degree, we have a second one, which is more career paths you can take with the bachelor's, which is probation and parole officer, rehab specialist, sales rep, social service specialist, teachers and writers. Again, these are all, good starting places, especially if you have connections that you can make, while you're in school. Luckily, I had those outside connections when I was getting ready to graduate. So when it was time for me to get that job, I was able to apply very easily, and luckily I got hired. It's nice to have connections, but it's also nice to see that there's a wide range of career paths you can take with your bachelor's degree. Right. So for the master's degree careers, again, there's a lot more. It's way more involved with clinical psychology, experimental, industrial, forensic, sports, and counseling. I believe that all of those are great within getting further into your career. Personally, I am both Bree and I are in the counseling psychology, so we're working on becoming counselors. I know her and I both have that sports interest, so it's nice to know that once you get your master's degree, it kind of opens up the door more for you than a bachelor's degree. But it's always good to take that extra step because there's so much more. I have a whole bunch of friends who have done master's programs and have their own practices, and they love it. I had a friend who graduated last year, and he is in his own practice with a few of his friends, and he absolutely loves it. He said it's more of like a freedom for him because he's using what he's learned and he's applying it in his own space that he created for himself. And that master's degree is that push forward for those options to happen.
All right, so after you get your master's, you can kind of go into a PhD or a PsyD program to become a psychologist. So what psychologists do, they examine human behavior, determine the underlying causes, and they help patients work through those problems. It's often a delicate balancing act, one that requires psychologists to perform a multitude of tasks that complement each other. So the following list outlines some duties that clinical psychologists perform. They can conduct psychological assessments. That kind of helps to diagnose different clinical conditions. You can conduct clinical interviews. That's kind of a way to learn history. Sometimes they call them intake assessments. You can learn more about your client in order to help kind of diagnose them. You can create treatment plans that helps kind of monitor their progress and their success, as well as adjust the treatment as need be. It creates a behavior modification program for patients. So that kind of is a formulation of like cognitive behavioral therapy, or behavior therapy, where you kind of look at what they're doing and kind of how those behaviors are affecting their mental side, as well as how those mental functioning affects that behavior or action that they are performing. It teaches patients coping strategies to help them overcome their problems. You can develop psychological education programs, conduct psychological resources, or research and then report those findings. You can prepare technical reports and presentations, so kind of like psychoeducation about any topic. There's not a topic that you can't educate someone on. You can also ensure that the patient records are accurate and complete, and then they keep abreast of current knowledge and trends by participating in continuing education courses and reading various journals. So becoming a psychologist, so students undergo a lot of education, like years. It kind of depends on what program you go into. I know the ones that I'm looking at personally range from 3 years to 5 years. Some of the programs also allow you to go at your own pace, so you can even complete them in 6 if it is easier for you to manage various life stressors and life things with getting a degree. So you have to get education and training to become a licensed psychologist, and it normally involves the following steps. You complete an undergraduate degree in psychology, either a Bachelor's of Arts or a Bachelor's of Science, to prepare you for graduate work. And then you don't necessarily have to get a master's, but it does help in getting into doc programs. So you can either go at 2 years or in a 3+2, like Robert Morris has our 3+2 program, where you have your undergraduate degree, and then you take some of those credits and you apply it to your graduate, vice versa. So when you graduate with 2 degrees at the end of 5 years, or 4 years. 4 years. So you can earn a doctorate in counseling or clinical psychology, either a PhD or a PsyD. Counseling is more applied work. So it's clinical, but clinical is more like diagnosis and treatment planning, more serious cases. Counseling is like basically anything, like they're kind of interchangeable. So I'm not sure why there's 2 different fields, but it's really interesting to see the difference in some programs and their curriculum. So you obtain clinical experience required to get licensed to practice. Normally it's roughly like, I'm going to say like 3,000-ish hours, maybe even more. I'm not sure. It's kind of dependent on the state that you're in and where you'd like to get licensed. Then you complete additional state licensure requirements. You earn a certification to promote career advancement. So you can definitely get certified in different areas to kind of help get you where you want to be and what you want to do. So for me, I would like to be a clinical or counseling psychologist with an emphasis in sports psychology. So then I would take classes to advance that sports psychology certification, maybe even become a CMPC, which is like a certified mental performance consultant. So like that's what I would be doing. But there's definitely other certifications that you can get if you were into like art therapy, or literally any type of theoretical orientation you're interested in. You can specialize in that. Okay, so talking about licensure and certification for psychologists, licensure, what is it? A license grants permission for psychologists to work with patients in a specific state. Licenses are designed to ensure that psychologists meet certain standards for education and experience before working with patients. So it gives you all the background criteria that you need in order to accurately and helpfully be able to work with patients, so that you're not teaching them things that aren't accurate or appropriate or just based on research. So who grants license? So individual states grants licensure after students take a licensing exam. Each state has its own criteria for granting license, but generally licensure candidates are expected to complete a doctoral degree in a psychological discipline. So again, that counseling, clinical degree, PsyD or PhD. Participate in clinical internship and complete at least 2,000 hours of hands-on experience. I said 3 before, I am corrected by this slide. It's 2,000 hours. Gain a few years of professional experiences in the field. So you kind of work alongside people that are already licensed and they supervise you with those hours. And then you have to pass an exam that was developed by the Association of State and Province Psychology Board. And then you pay applicable licensing fees required by the state in order to be licensed. So the difference between licensure and a certification is that a certification is a voluntary credential that psychologists can earn to demonstrate additional or specialty knowledge and skills. So again, I mentioned before, like I want to be certified as a sports psychologist, so I would have to get that additional certification and training in order to list myself as a sports psychologist. So it helps psychologists to demonstrate their expertise and boost their competitiveness in the job market. So who grants these certifications? They're granted by the American Board of Professional Psychology. The organization offers credentials in 13 subsections of the field, including but not limited to clinical health, rehabilitations, couple and family, and psychoanalysis. How do you get certified? So candidates must meet general requirements, including a doctoral degree and licensure, as well as specific requirements related to that specialty. So there's certain classes that I will have to take in order to, like in sport, in order to become a sports psychologist. They then submit their credentials to the organization, complete an oral and written exam, and then pay $125 for an application fee. So we're going to talk a little bit about different psychologists and kind of what they do. Clinical and counseling psychologists, they can work with patients who have mental, behavioral, and emotional problems. They focus on the assessment, diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of mental health problems. So this can be in private practice or in hospitals. You can also work in like a more public company or on like a college campus as well. So child psychologists, basically just the psychological development of children and adolescents. You kind of work with different age groups as a child psychologist. There's geropsychology, which is like working with more elderly patients, patients with dementia. They can also be coping with death and death of partners and friends. Then there's clinical forensic psychology, and that kind of looks at things where you will be able to testify in court, interview people who are charged with crimes to determine if they have mental illness, and then screening law enforcement applications. I actually have a former supervisor who does that, and she said that there was a lot of education going into that, but that it's well worth it because that's just that field of psychology probably won't go away. Actually, most of these won't go away. The behavioral psychologist. Behavioral psychologists practice from the assumption of human behavior is learned and can be modified through environmental influences. So the different subsections are behavioral health counselors, which work with like anxiety, stress, low self-esteem, and depression. Marriage and family therapists, it's kind of in the name. They work on the relationship problems of couples and families by addressing both individual issues and relationships as a whole family system. Industrial organizational psychologists, they apply their expertise to issues in the workplace. So they typically help companies create policies, they screen jobs, job candidates, and address various problems in the workplace. They can also be corporate trainers. Academic and research psychologists. So they normally help to expand the knowledge base of the field by using scientific methods to address specific psychological topics, a process that entails creating testable hypotheses, collecting data, and analyzing and reporting the findings. There can be psychology professors, research psychologists, lab managers, all of which do research to kind of better the field and make empirical data, empirical research to be able to support various theories. They're always reevaluating, always looking on ways to update how we kind of practice as psychologists and counselors for that matter.
Okay, so Bree just went through a whole bunch of things. Those are mostly the common ways to go within the field of psychology. So it's important to know that there are additional psychology career specialties. There's health psychologists and neuropsychology. So within health psychologists, there's clinical health psychology, community health psychology, critical health psychology, public health psychology, and occupational health psychology. That's a lot of different health psychologies. Basically, their main goals are to like focus within like behaviors, focus within theories, and like applying them into the communities, working with like preventing diseases, applying critical theory, working with things within that can work within our entire country, and working within physical health in individuals of specific occupations. So that's a whole bunch within health psychologist. And on the other side, you have neuropsychology, which this is the study of the relationship between behavior, emotion, and cognition on the one hand, and brain function on the other. So you're working within how your relationships between behavior, emotions, and cognitions kind of work with what's happening in your brain, and they kind of coincide and work together. School psychology is a field of study that applies principles from educational psychology, developmental psychology, clinical psychology, community psychology, and behavior analysis to meet the learning and behavioral health needs of children and adolescents. That is a really growing field. I've had a few of my friends who've gotten their master's within the past 5 to 6 years, who are now mental health counselors in certain schools. I have a friend who works in a school with children with special needs. The school is designed for kids at the pre-K level up to the age of 21, and they work with them and they help them from being very small, helping them get through schooling, and then they stay to the age of 21 to help them through the vocational process of trying to get a job when the time is right for them. Social psychology is the scientific study of how people's thoughts, feelings, beliefs, intention, and goals are constructed within a social context by the actual or imagined interaction with others. I find social psychology very interesting because a lot of jobs apply social psychology, like not as social psychology, but like incorporate ideas of it into like their own fields of practice. It's important to have social psychology in like everything they do because most people need to be socially active. Sports psychology, again, like what Bree was saying about how she wants to do that, is basically the proficiency that uses psychological knowledge and skills to address optimal performance and well-being of athletes, developmental and social aspects of sports participation, and systematic issues associated with sports settings and organizations. I have my bachelor's in general psychology with a sports concentration. I don't know if I'm going to take that further step. I'm contemplating it. I think I'm going to because, like Bree, I very much do love sports and I do want to help athletes as much as I possibly can. So I feel like that will be an interesting field to go in. But yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so a little bit of advice going into the field. Amber and I are kind of going to talk about each one of these just together. And then if there are questions at the end, you can put them in the chat box or we can kind of talk about it. But the first one being finding a mentor. So finding a mentor that can guide you, support you, challenge you through the different process of not only your undergraduate degree, but maybe a master's and a doctoral if that is what you prefer. Mentoring relationships can develop informally, but it's also a good idea to seek out a mentor, especially beginning this journey towards becoming a psychologist or an individual in the psychology field. You don't have to go on in further education to have a mentor. It's always good to kind of talk to someone about problems that you may come up in the field. So Dr. Monda is my mentor. I have known her since I was a sophomore in high school. She introduced me to the field, really got me involved in the sports psychology field, and then helped me kind of develop who I wanted to be and how I wanted to kind of help student athletes. And that she kind of helped me realize that I want to be clinical and counseling, as well as a sports psychologist. So I want to be able to optimize sport performance for student athletes, as well as help them with their overall well-being and mental health concerns, especially if they go through trauma or things of that nature. Those are all areas that really interest me. And she helped me kind of walk through that. She's also helped me apply to various master's programs. Of course, I came to this one because I just can't get away from this place. But yeah, and then she's helped me apply to doc programs.
Yeah, Dr. Monda, she's also my mentor. when I had a switch of fate going into my sophomore year of college, I decided to go the route of psychology, and I met Dr. Monda, and she basically guided me on what to do and how to do it. And without her, I would be like completely lost. And I think I would have chose a different like field of study that I would have hated. So I'm very happy that she became my mentor when I came into the psychology section of RMU. Yeah, same thing. Like she's guided me through different things. She like told me that, you know, if you're ready to apply like masters, like you got it, just take that step. And like I was like, okay. So I did, and I came back to Robert Morris myself. And like going off of that, anybody like in our department, I feel like that teaches psychology are all great mentors, and they're all awesome. I feel like you can't go wrong with anybody being your mentor in our department, because all of our professors, you know, really care about our, like the students and stuff. So I have a feeling if you find Dr. Paul or Dr. Wheeler or Dr. Pandit, you know, you'll be in good hands, and they'll help you get through your journey of being in psychology.
Exactly. So moving on to our second point, be open to self-exploration. So psychologists are actually founded on the statement, counselors know thyself. So before you can begin to help others, you have to know more about yourself and who you are or who you want to be. So this is such an important aspect of being a skilled psychologist or therapist or counselor or just individual in the field, mainly because it just helps you to understand your own personal way of going about things, and it understands like what are your barriers, what are your strengths, how can you help people, what are triggers for you. I know personally I have been going through a lot of different things, and they're actually showing up in the clients that I have in my internship. So I am working with my supervisor to kind of understand like how am I going to separate my stuff and the things that I'm going through with that of my client. So that's really important to know, because if they didn't walk in and they didn't have those same issues, I wouldn't be able to identify like, oh, that's triggering for me. Oh, that's something I'm going to have to work on. So it's always good to kind of do a lot of self-reflection, think about what you're doing and why you do the things you do, kind of dig deep into your past and kind of understand how you got to where you are.
Yeah, that's, I mean, a great way to put it. Self-exploring is really important, especially in this field, because you are there to help people. So you have to be aware of everything that you know, how you feel, what your barriers are and stuff. And with that, with the year experience I gained before coming back to school, I learned that I am different to each of my clients. I had to explore different ways to present myself because no two of my clients are the same. And that was very hard to do because I've never learned how to do that. Like you don't think you have to do that, but like I eventually adjusted, and you know, it really taught me on how there's more aspects to me that I can help provide that help to others. And it's very important in our field.
Well said, Amber. Okay, so our third point is finding your own path. So there's no right or wrong way to become a psychologist or individual in the field. Some will enter a doctoral program right from undergrad. Some will work for some years and return to school later, while others will undergo a complete career change. Respect your own journey and realize that wherever you come from you, bringing the different strengths and resources that helped you with your career. So what I will say to that is be adaptable, be flexible, know yourself, listen to yourself. Like if you're getting burnout in a particular area, especially in this field, identify a different way that maybe you can approach that perspective or that population, or maybe just switch altogether. It's okay to go different pathways, to do different things. Like everyone's journey looks different. I know personally, like I said, coming into college, like in my bachelor's, I specifically wanted to do sports psychology. I didn't have an interest in clinical or counseling. I just wanted to help athletes. And then I kind of developed this feeling as I took classes that I want to be able to do more. And so I respected myself when I listened to what I felt in my stomach, in my heart, like what I was meant to do. And I kind of went for it. And I just risked, okay, like I'm going to do this. This is great. And you kind of just have to go about that with life as well. I didn't think I would get a counseling degree for my master's, but here I am. So I would just say, like, be open, be willing to do different things and respect your journey.
Absolutely. 5 years ago, if you would have told me you're going to get a degree in psychology and you're going to go back to school and get your master's, I would have laughed at you in your face, because I was a nursing major at that point of time, and I was headset, and by my sophomore year I was just like, this isn't for me. And I had a big decision to make from winter break into spring semester, and I said, all right, here we go. And I came back and I said, all right, we're gonna do psychology. And my first class was Dr. Paul. It was cognitive psychology. And I was just like, just hearing him talk, I was like, yeah, this is my fit. It's just like everything just spoke to me more, and I'm happy I made the transition when I did, because I mean, I give nurses a lot of credit. I just don't think it would have personally fit me as much as psychology does. So I do not discourage if you change your mind. You know, everybody's path is different, and it's important to find what's meant for you, but only do it for you. Don't do what your mom or dad wants you to do. Do what you want to do, because it's your life and your path. So whatever makes you happy, I strongly encourage going for it.
Yeah. All right, so our fourth point is be prepared to evolve within the field. So psychology and counseling are ever evolving. And I kind of mentioned that in the third point with being flexible, being adaptable. Psychotherapy was once viewed as an inferior psychotherapy method, but it has developed a strong presence within the mental health field, especially because of COVID. It had to be a thing because we couldn't see each other in person. And so now it's probably never going to go away. It'll always be a method that we use for whatever reason. So there's different advantages for certain groups, and it makes it more accessible for populations. There's a much stronger focus on integrated healthcare models in which psychologists are part of health professional teams. As the mental field continues to evolve, you must be ready to evolve with it. So constantly looking at new research, looking at new ways of doing therapy, or just being ways of practicing. I will say again that everything is going to change eventually, whether we like it or not. So might as well change with it than sit back and keep the same type of mentality.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one thing I've learned is, within my own experience, using one orientation of theory is not the best way to go, because again, no two clients are the same. So you have to be open up to the idea of, although you might not like all the theories, it's good to have a wide range of understanding of most of them. That way you are able to apply it. And like the tele-rehab, the teletherapy, I did it. Was it hard? Yeah, it wasn't easy, because, you know, we're all new to it. It's different, but it's just like being able to gain that experience is helpful for things like this that's going on with COVID, because we don't really know when COVID's going to go away. So it's important that we involve in this field, because the world's constantly changing. We're constantly changing. And from that, we have to remember that our careers are going to constantly change with it. So don't be afraid to evolve, and don't be afraid to adapt new ideas, as they can be quite successful.
Exactly. Before we get to questions, here are the resources. Before we also get to questions, I would just like to mention that October 12th at 10:30 a.m. is our next Let's Talk webinar. It's about networking and psychology student resources. So please look out for that email, for that Google Meet link, as well as our flyers that we send out. And then in addition to our webinars this year, we are going to do tip sheets in between each webinar. So those will probably occur at the end of every month in between the webinars. So our next one is September 28th. So look out for that email. That will be finding the right studying strategies. Darlene will send out the information sheet, and then if you have any questions, please reach back out. We will also be posting this to YouTube and to Facebook, so if there's ever a time you want to rewatch it, go to our YouTube channel, RMU Psychology, and then we are going to stop recording so that some of the members that showed up, we can kind of have them ask some questions.